Hi guys, welcome to the biology video for Monday, April 20th. Last week we started talking about vertebrates and we're going to continue just zipping right along with the vertebrates today. We're actually going to cover 3 classes within the subphylum Vertebrata, which of course is part of the phylum Chordata in the kingdom Animalia. So we're going to talk about amphibians, reptiles, and birds all in one lecture. And why the hurry? Because I want to have time to talk a little more in depth about mammals, but especially I want you to have time to go through human anatomy and physiology. Because if I don't cover it with you in 10th grade, there won't be another time where it gets covered unless you decide to take one of the anatomy classes that are going to start to be offered next year. So I'm going to start going through the notes that I've attached to this announcement, and we'll start right out with the amphibians. So you guys know amphibians, they're frogs and salamanders and newts, toads. Amphibians live part of their life in the water and part of their life on land. Amphibian means double-lifed, and so that's where they get their name. Probably I'm not going to, there's probably nothing listed there about amphibians that you don't already know, so I don't really feel the necessity to read those all out to you, but I will highlight the ones that might not be quite as obvious. So just remember that amphibians, when they respire, when they exchange oxygen for carbon dioxide, they can do that in a number of ways. The immature amphibians do that through gills before they metamorphosize. So we're talking like tadpoles, and they respire through gills. When they're adults, in most species, those gills disappear and they have lungs as adults through which they exchange gases. Their mouth lining and their skin is also it's very thin, and it has blood vessels that are right up next to it, and they're able to exchange some gases right through the skin on the outside of their body and in their mouth lining. Now, some amphibians do keep their gills into adulthood. There's some gilled salamanders that are like that, and they're really cute. They look like they have these little frilly ruffles on the side of their neck, but most develop lungs as adults. They're cold-blooded, ectothermic. Their bodies take on the temperature of the surroundings. When they reproduce, it's only through sexual reproduction. Fertilization is external, which means the eggs are fertilized after the female lays them. In a lot of cases, they'll be like the male and the female are together, and the male will be behind the female, and as she lays her eggs, he fertilizes them. And then those eggs hatch outside of the female's body. The eggs have a jelly covering, and so they have to be laid in the water or they would dry out. There's 3 classes within there's 3 orders, kingdom, phylum, class, order, 3 orders in the class Amphibia, and they're listed here. We're not really familiar with these because they don't occur where we live, but there is an animal called a Sicilian that kind of looks like a giant earthworm on the outside, but it has a bony skeleton on the inside that is classified as an amphibian, and it's in the order Apoda. Caudata, you see that word caudal in there, which means relating to the tail. So these are the tailed amphibians, like the newts and the salamanders, one that keep their tails into adulthood. And then Anura, that order contains the frogs and the toads. Where they don't have a tail as adult, they have a large head, short front legs, muscular hind legs. Now, we spent a lot more time on the internal anatomy of the frog in 7th grade, and of course we dissected it, but that's really all we're going to talk about amphibians this year. Just a quick, hey, remember what an amphibian is? And that's the same thing we're really going to do for reptiles. So another class within the subphylum Vertebrata in the phylum Chordata. Remember that reptiles are dry and scaly. They're mostly ectothermic. Their fertilization and sexual reproduction is internal. They lay their eggs on land, and they don't dry out there because they have a leathery covering, and their eggs are what are called amniotic eggs, which means they have stored food. They have a yolk sac inside on which the developing baby can live until it hatches. Some lizards and snakes actually hold their fertilized eggs in their body, and the eggs hatch inside the female's body. So they're a little bit different than your classic reptile. Reptiles, of course, can be land animals or aquatic animals, but even if they're aquatic, all reptiles have lungs, so they have to come to the surface to get air. So sea turtles don't have gills, they have lungs. Sea snakes, lungs, so on. So within the class Reptilia, there's a number of different orders that are listed here. And basically, they're divided into 4 groups by these orders. You have the turtles and tortoises in one group. You have the snakes and lizards in another group, the alligators and crocodiles in another. And then you have this, the tuataras are in another order. Tuataras look a lot like iguanas to me, but I'm not like a reptile specialist by any means, but this over here is a tuatara and this is an iguana. There's a difference in the skull structure of the tuatara, and tuataras have like this extra like eye spot on the top of their head that allow them to perceive images that, I don't know images, but like I think they're able to detect like the presence of light or the absence of light. And iguanas don't have that. Okay, just a quick rundown on reptiles. Now we're gonna look at the birds really quickly. So here we go, make that a little bit bigger. Okay, birds belong in the class Aves. That's where we get our word aviation. Birds have a number of distinguishing characteristics. So, of course, we all could probably list these without having to think much about it. Birds have feathers. They have lightweight bones. Their bones are hollowed out. You see, here's a picture of one of their bones here. And they've got these cross struts that basically kind of keep the bone from collapsing. So it's strong even though it's hollow. Of course, they have wings. Most of them fly, but you always have your weirdos like the ostrich and the penguin and stuff. They have bills. They don't have teeth. Their heart is 4-chambered like mammals. I'll come back to the air sacs. They're endothermic, so this is the first warm-blooded vertebrate we've talked about where they can keep their body temperature relatively constant in a wide range of external temperatures. That's one reason their feathers are helpful, because their feathers help insulate their bodies against the outside, allow them to keep their heat in when it's cold. They're oviparous, which means they lay eggs that hatch outside of their body. Their eggs are brittle. The shells of their eggs contain a substance called lime. They only, in their bodies, while mammals have paired ovaries, like the female has an ovary on each side. Birds only have one developed ovary and one developed oviduct, if you're talking about female birds. Now, on this list here, I've put an asterisk by every characteristic that makes flight possible within a bird, because just like in the fish, its whole body is designed to be able to live life well in the water. The birds, for most birds, because most birds fly, their bodies are completely, have so many different, I won't say completely, they just have many, many different features that make it possible for them to fly. One of those features are that their lungs have air sacs attached to them. And if you had me for 7th grade, we talked about this. This picture shows just the respiratory system of a bird. So you see its trachea, which is like our windpipe. This is their syrinx, which is like our voice box, or our what's called larynx. And this is how they sing. They pass air through this this little structure that has like vocal cords that are sort of like our voice box. And then down on each side, you see there's a lung that's sort of a red color. These white structures down here that look sort of like blobby cotton on this picture, those are actually hollowed out sacs. And you may remember from 7th grade that because of these sacs, birds are able to have fresh, oxygen-rich air in their lungs when they inhale and when they exhale. So if you think about it, like we did in 7th grade, when you breathe in, your lungs are full of oxygen-rich air, but until you breathe that all out again, they're not. They're full of oxygen-poor air. So kind of half your life, you have oxygen-rich air in your lungs, and the other half, you have oxygen-poor air. Well, in a bird, they're able to have oxygen-rich air when they inhale and exhale, like I said. And the reason is because when they breathe in, air enters not only their lungs, but it goes into these air sacs that are attached to their lungs as well. Now, in their lungs, they give the air that's in the lungs loses its oxygen to the blood vessels in the lungs, just like ours. So while the fresh air is in the lungs after breathing in, that air becomes like unfresh or less oxygenated as the oxygen in their lungs enters their blood and the carbon dioxide in their blood enters their lungs. So there is a little like instant where it's not fresh, but as soon as they start to breathe out, these air sacs empty, and this fresh air that's just been held in these air sacs, because no exchange of gases happens in the air sacs, it's just a holding tank. That fresh air that's been stored in there from the inhalation is now going to be pushed out through the lungs. And so the lung, as the air is being pushed out from it, is getting basically filled with oxygen-rich air that had been stored in these air sacs. That's really important because, and it goes back to aerobic cellular respiration. If they're going to fly, we say that this makes flight possible. To sustain flight, they have to have a lot of energy to keep their wings flapping, you know, flapping. That's just, that takes a lot of ATP. Well, to make ATP, you have to have mitochondria, and for your mitochondria to work, you have to have oxygen, right, 6O2 plus sugar, C6H12O6, and then in your mitochondria, that gets broken down into 6 carbon dioxide, 6 water, and 36 ATP are made. So if you need a lot of ATP, you need a lot of sugar, and you need a lot of oxygen. So in order to get that extra oxygen so that you can have extra ATP to sustain the flight, God's designed it so that their lungs are able to have fresh oxygen when they breathe in and when they breathe out. Now, that's half of the formula, the O2. The C6H12O6, the sugar, I don't have that listed here, but they're able to get enough sugar to make enough ATP because they eat a lot, for one thing. And for another thing, they have a crop that stores the food that they eat. And so it's almost like they have an air tank strapped to their back, and they have a sack of food, strapped to their back, except they're on the inside of their body, these storage pouches, and they just draw from that as they need to get more ATP as they want to sustain flight. Of course, if a bird's going to fly long distances, like during migration, then usually they'll fatten up before the flight. So they'll lay down fat in their bodies, and they burn the fat to make ATP as they're flying those long distances for long periods of time. Okay, speaking of migration, most birds migrate, and there's, as you I'm sure know, there's 2 major advantages to that. First of all, birds, when they migrate, are able to live in warm climates throughout the year, which means they have abundant food throughout the year. And then migration also provides the best opportunities or the best environment for raising their young. So it just is one way that God provides for the birds. Okay, a typical bird egg. I mentioned that a reptile egg is amniotic. Bird eggs are amniotic too. And this is just a cross section basically of like a raw egg. And you'll notice the three main structures. The yolk, of course, you guys probably know, is the stored food for the developing baby bird inside the egg. The albumin, which is the white part, or in an egg that you've just cracked, is the clear, the colorless part. When you fry it, it becomes white. That protects the yolk, and it provides some additional nutrients for the baby. And then you have this structure, which I do not know how to pronounce that word, but if you've ever cracked an egg, you notice sometimes it looks like it almost has a little teeny piece of white yarn in it. That's this structure here, and it helps keep the yolk and the embryo suspended in the center of the egg, because if the embryo or the yolk get attached to the side of the egg, development doesn't go well. And then of course there's a little airspace in the egg where oxygen and carbon dioxide can be exchanged with the environment. And because the egg has little tiny pores all throughout it, the eggshell, through which oxygen and carbon dioxide can be exchanged. Okay, so again, not sure that I really gave you any new information today. Maybe just reminded you of some things that you already knew, or took it just a little deeper with what we know about aerobic cellular respiration or stuff like that. But that's pretty much it for those vertebrates. On Thursday of this week, we're going to have a quiz on the cold-blooded vertebrates, so the fish and the amphibian and the reptiles. And then next Tuesday, we'll have a quiz on the warm-blooded vertebrates, which will be the birds and the mammals. And then we'll have our test on vertebrates next Thursday. And so as soon as we can, we'll be jumping into the mammals and then going into human anatomy, so we can try to get that in before the year ends. So I'll take a look at how long this video ends up being. It's probably going to be pretty long because I covered 3 different classes of vertebrates. And I may give you another video or 2 to watch today, or I may just save all those for tomorrow, but I probably won't have another one of my own videos for you until Wednesday. So as always, if you need anything before then, let me know. You will have an assignment tomorrow. It will be watching videos about these things. Okay, so I'll see you later. Bye-bye.